Yesterday is the past, tomorrow is the future, and today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. And in the present, we're going to learn about the future. 안녕하세요, Cloud입니다. Hey guys, Cloud here. Today we're going to learn a couple things. In lesson 9 of How to Study Korean, we're going to learn about ida and how it conjugates. And we're going to learn a little bit more about the future tense. Sorry about that. Alright, so going through the vocab. Here are some cool words that are all related. Talking about food. So 소고기, 소, 돼지고기, 돼지, 고기. So I definitely recommend knowing those. Other than that, I mean, all of these words are pretty common, I'd say. EJ is really common. So I'd take a look even at the sentences that he gives. I think at the end of this lesson, okay, you might not be able to understand all the sentences, but you should know at least a couple of them. All right, let's get right into it. Conjugating ida. In earlier lessons, we learned a lot about conjugating verbs and adjectives. Exactly 3 things can be conjugated in Korean, which is something that I find actually with students, is that they try to conjugate nouns, which is really weird. You don't do that. You conjugate verbs, adjectives, and ida. Basically, yeah. So the conjugation of ida is a little bit different than verbs and adjectives. There are many times where ida behaves differently than verbs and adjectives, which is very true. Yeah, it's definitely true. In this lesson, we're going to learn about conjugating ida, and we're going to see how it conjugates differently. And the sentence below shows the plain form, present tense conjugation of ida, which you have seen already. So 나는 선생님이다. So I'm a teacher. Now, if the last if the last letter of the noun before ida, is it still close to my face? Can you guys see my face? I think you should. I'll just move it a little bit so you can see my face. I hope I didn't mess up the volume. I think it should be fine. Let me check. Yeah, it looks fine. Sorry. If the last letter of the noun before ida ends in a vowel, you can eliminate e. So 나는 의사다. You can also say 나는 의사이다. And both of them can be correct. Usually you just merge the pronunciation of the vowel in the noun. If I were to say both of these really quickly, you wouldn't notice a difference. That's why you can just say ida. It does make a difference if there is a 받침, so you can't say 선생님다. That doesn't really work. It also just doesn't flow. In almost every case, you can conjugate ida differently depending on the noun. If it's okay, just I think we've done this enough. All right, now the past tense in the plain form, you just add 었다. Really simple. So 의사이었다, 선생님이었다, and then the pronunciation is actually 였다 when the noun when you attach it. So like here, 의사였다. So you wouldn't say 선생님이었다, you'd say 선생님이었다 because you can't merge it. So same reason we can't merge in 의사 or 선생님 in the present tense because there's a 받침. Here there's a 받침, so we can't merge the past tense either. So pronounce both of those and listen to the difference. Not only that 선생님이었다 is hard to pronounce, it's difficult to move your mouth from the mium sound straight directly to the 요 sound. It's much easier to pronounce it like 나는 선생님이었다, which is true. I think that the whole reason they put this is just because it makes it easier to pronounce. Although I'm only talking about the past tense plain form, the same rule applies in many situations. Alright, ida in the present tense. Conjugating ida is a bit confusing compared to the past tense because new syllables are added without any logic to them. This is one thing I also find trouble explaining to students is there's no real logic behind it, but it just is, so you kind of do it. A lot of times I just tell them, yeah, it just happens just cause. And ida is one of the harder ones to kind of think of a reason for it because it just goes to ieo or ia, and I can't even make up something for that. I'll make up stuff depending, especially if they're younger, like 11 or 12. I'll make stuff up just because it's easier for them to remember. But I don't know about this one. So in the low informal, respect to the lowest form, 이다 becomes 이야. So if it ends in a 받침, if there's no 받침, it's just 야. So 나는 좋은 학생이야. I'm a good student. 그것은 책이야. That's a book. 나는 선생님이야. You get the point. Same thing for no 받침. You just wouldn't add the 이. 그것은 사과야. 나는 의사야. 야구는 좋은 스포츠야. And then 아니다 would be 아니야. So you don't have to worry. I don't think there's a situation where you don't put the 이. Yeah, so it's just always 아니야. So it's pretty simple. So 학생이 아니야. And then to go up a little bit in the formality level to the informal high respect, the one that ends in 요 most of the time, you add 이에요 if there's a 받침 and 예요 if there's no 받침. So 사진이에요, 사진이에요, 선생님이에요, 학생이에요. And if there's no 받침, like 누나, 누나예요, you wouldn't say 누나이에요. I guess if you say it fast enough, 누나이에요, 누나예요. I mean, you can fly. You don't have to worry too much about it when pronouncing it. Just know that you probably wouldn't write it that way. Then someone would kind of, it would look funky or weird. But if you just write it or say it really quickly, I don't know if someone would notice. They probably might, but it's not the biggest deal. 사과예요. And then 아니다, just 아니에요. Note that, oh yeah, so this is true. Note that Korean people are often confused if they need to add 예요 or 에요 to 아니다. Therefore, it's not uncommon to see somebody write 아니예요 instead of 아니에요. Honestly, if you put a gun to my head before I saw this, before I did this multiple times and taught it, if you put a gun to my head and asked me, like, for the past 2 years, which one is it? I wouldn't know. I might actually put 아니예요, the wrong one. 아니에요. I have no idea. So yeah, it's not too important. All right, now the highest respect, the formal high respect, the one that ends in 니다 a lot of the times. So 입니다. So as you hear, 안녕하세요, 클라우드입니다. So 입니다 is just 이다. I am Cloud. So you just add 이 from 이다 and add 피읍 니다. So 저는 의사입니다. 형입니다. 선생님입니다. 학생입니다. With words ending in vowels, so no 받침, you can just eliminate the e and add 피읍 니다 directly. This is more commonly done in conversation and not usually written. I did not know that. 아닙니다. I guess, yeah, because most of the time I write it down. I write it... I see. Okay, sorry. Sometimes I know things, but I don't necessarily remember how I know them. So when I see it actually written down and read it, it like jogs my memory or makes connections. The other day, I was something that I knew just from listening and reading is 라니까. It's added. So the way you quote sometimes in Korean, this is really high level, so maybe I shouldn't explain it. Or not high level, it's just a bit more advanced. But I made a connection in my mind. I was like, I wonder why that is. And then all of a sudden it became clear to me. And I remembered a specific example in my brain that made it clear of me watching something and someone saying like, 그만해, and then they didn't stop. And it was like, 그만하라니까, or 그만하라고, or whatever they said. And then it clicked in my head that she was giving an order, and that's why she used 다니까, and it was just like, oh my god. And then I looked it up, and I was like, I'm right, oh my god. Anyways, I knew how to use it, I just didn't realize that was a rule. Alright, in the past tense, 이다 becomes 이었다 or 였다. So, 학생이었어. Well, depending on the formality, right? So, low and formal, 선생님이었어, 선생님이었어요 for informal high respect. And then if we're gonna combine, so like 애기였어 instead of 애기이었어, So remember, it's the same thing we talked about over there. We're just getting rid of the ta, really. Here we're adding a yo, so 비밀이었어요. Instead of 비밀이었다, you're adding 이었어요. And then 이사였어요. Same thing, we're combining here because there's no 받침. The plain form, I thought we talked about this already. You should add the regular ta ending. Oh, I guess right now we're just talking about the contraction of the plain form. So 선생님이었다. I could have sworn we talked about this. I think we did. I remember doing these. All right, and then the formal high respect, again, it's probably going to end in 니다 or 니다. So 선생님이었습니다. 의사였습니다. I think this is relatively straightforward. You kind of just add it onto there. If there's a 받침, if there's no 받침, you don't really add it on. You shorten it. In all situations, the past tense 아니다 is conjugated just like any other word. So I think here he goes through all the 4 different forms. So the low informal 아니었어, 학생이 아니었어, and then the plain form 학생이 아니었다, the low high informal 저는 학생이 아니었어요, and then the formal high respect form 저는 학생이 아니었습니다. The weird thing is that Korean speakers often would say 아니었어, 아니었다. Alright, I got really self-conscious because I was like, dang, I'm pronouncing these wrong and or not wrong, but I'm pronouncing it the way I'm used to, and it's not written that way, so I should probably say it the way it's written. But I keep saying 였어 instead of 었어, and good thing I'm not crazy, and it's because that's how I got used to it. Just going by the rules of the language, I'd have to assume that the first set is correct. I base this on the fact that no other word do we add 였다 to the stem. In other words, 였 is created from 이, 였. I don't understand what he's trying to say here, but basically, if you pronounce it this way, which I've been pronouncing it the entire time, I think, I've been trying not to, but I just end up pronouncing it this way. 아니었어요. Yeah, it's just kind of natural. So don't worry about the pronunciation too much, is what he's saying. You can pronounce it this way and it's fine. You'll probably hear it a lot too. Alright, now, we learned in lesson 6, adding 겠어 or 겠다, 겠어요, 겠습니다 is how you change a word into the future. So if you remember the intro, I talked about talking about the future tense in the present. Well, now we're going to see why I said that. So here he reminds us that in lesson 6 we learned about 겠다, which is great. And that's how we said we take things to the future tense. Now, there is a more common way to conjugate in the future. Before we learn how to do this, you needed to learn more grammar. Basically, we needed to learn how to conjugate 이다. And now that we know how to conjugate 이다, we can conjugate the future tense in a different way, a more common way. So, either way, 겠다 is used in Korean, but not as much as what we're about to learn. For verbs or adjectives, when conjugating into the future tense, you first add rir or to the stem of the word. So by now you should be very comfortable. If there's no 받침, you're just gonna add the rir straight on the bottom of the word. If there is a 받침, like 선생님, you're gonna add it should be habit at this point that if there's no 받침 and if there's a 받침, you know which one to add, and it shouldn't be like, well, does it the way the words? It should just be pretty common since you've done this for 9 lessons, and if you do like a lesson a week, they're pretty long, so a lesson a week is actually not that slow at all. That's at least 9 weeks. That's a couple months, so you should feel a little comfortable with them. So first, so 가다 becomes 칼, because there's no 받침. So we always add stuff to the stem of the verb or the adjective. So you get rid of the 타 because we just want the stem. So 칼, and then 먹다, we'll add so 먹을. This is going to sound extremely complicated, and it is. Adding rir /er to the stem of the adjective changes. Oh yeah, this is a bit interesting. I'm so happy that I learned this before learning it, but I figured out how to do it, or I learned how to do it before I learned why we do it or the explanation. So it was natural. It came natural to me. Actually, when I first found out that in lesson 6 that 겠다 was the future tense when I was going through how to study Korean, I was like, dang, I did not know that. I thought 겠다 was like used for something completely different. It's kind of the future tense, but it's kind of the present. And then I was like, maybe like he's obviously knows more than I do, but somewhere deep inside I was like, maybe he's wrong. And then later on I found out he's not wrong, but because I knew this form for the future tense, and when he didn't mention it, I was like, this is really weird. But then I realized in lesson 9, that's because we have to conjugate ida, and we haven't learned how to do that yet. But what I was going to say is, I think this is a very confusing concept. It could be because I never learned it, and I never tried to learn it. But he even says it sounds extremely complicated, and it is. So I definitely advocate for input. So as long as you have enough input that you hear it so often that even if you don't understand it 100%, you can use it, which is what I advocate and what I use to learn languages. So adding rier/e to the stem of an adjective changes it to a word that can describe a noun in the future tense. Meaning, we learned how to do this in the past tense. So when we had 행복하다 and we wanted to use it as an adjective, like in lesson 5, I want to say, we learned how to add nian or 은 to the verb stem. So 크다, if we wanted to say a long, a long boat, or a big boat, 큰 배 or 큰 집, a big house. So we add the nian. Same thing for 행복하다. So we 행복한 사람, a happy person. Now, if we wanted to do this instead of just in the present tense, like someone who is happy, to someone who will be happy, or a person who will be happy, we would actually add the rier instead of the nian. It's very similar to what we did in lesson 5. So I definitely recommend going back there, looking at, if you did the worksheet, or if you just practiced the lesson and saw the conjugations, go over it, remember how it's done, and then realize that if you just change the nian or the 은 to the rier or all you're doing is you're changing that to something that'll happen in the future. So instead of someone being happy now, he will be happy later. 행복할 사람, a person that will be happy. Alright, similarly, this is where things get complicated. Adding rier or to a stem of a verb turns it into a word that can describe a noun in the future. So 먹을 음식, food that will be eaten. In practice, entire clauses ending in verbs, which in turn describe the noun, are commonly used. He means not just that 먹을 음식, but with something along with it. 제가 먹을 음식, and then blah 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 blah. So the food that will be eaten by me, or the food that I'm gonna eat. You can just skip this. I don't think it's necessary, but if you can't understand the explanation between the lines, so here, don't worry. That level of grammar is difficult to grasp at this stage of learning. I don't think so. I think it's very similar to lesson 5, except it's not just adjectives, it's verbs. You can do it with verbs too. Doing verbs with the nian/은 is much different. You don't actually do that. But adding rier/e can be used for adjectives and verbs. So it's a bit easier, I'd say. And if you don't understand it, then don't worry. That level of grammar is very difficult to grasp at this stage of learning. The grammar will be discussed deeply in lesson 26 to 29. Really? Oh, snap. Yeah, it is. I need to prepare to make this lesson, actually. I don't need to prepare. I just need to record it. So if you want to jump ahead, feel free. However, the mechanics within the grammar are not important to you yet. For now, these are the 3 major points that I want you to think about. Adding rier/e. We talked about this already. Yeah, it just allows you to describe something in the future. Because they're newly formed words can describe nouns, they must be followed by a noun. That's something you need to remember. Alright, what does it have to do with conjugating in the future? When Korean people conjugate to the future, they usually do this by adding rier/e to a verb and adjective, just what we did. Oh, here, you see, he said that. This is essentially the same as adding nian/은 to an adjective stem, which you already know. 좋다 to 좋은 사람. You should know, however, that you cannot end a sentence like 나는 좋은 what? I'm a good writer, I'm a good person, 좋은 사람이다. So yeah, you can't just end it with an adjective like that. So when you're conjugating the future tense, you add 리을 slash 행복할, 먹을, 공부할, and then this changes the verbs, adjectives into adjectives that describe nouns. Therefore, just like 좋은, a noun must follow. So what are we going to follow after 행복할, 먹을, 공부할? We're going to add 것, thing. We talked about 것 a lot before. Now, to end the sentence, we just add 이다 to the noun. So 것이다. So 행복할 것이다. 먹을 것이다. 공부할 것이다. Now, if you directly translate these sentences to English, they mean I am a thing who will be happy, or I am a thing who will eat, or I am a thing who will study. I have never thought of it that way. It just, I'll study, or I will eat, or I will be happy. So yeah, that's their actual meaning is this. Now, ida can be conjugated depending on the politeness level or formality. So we already talked about it. 것이에요, or 것입니다, or 것이다, depending on what you want, right? So also it has to stay in the present tense because this is the future tense, and if you conjugate the future tense to the past tense, then basically ida just stays in the present tense. So you only have to worry about when you're conjugating the future tense, you tag along ida at the end after 곧, and then ida just stays in whatever tense that it's in, the present tense, and then you can shift the formality level depending on what you want. Now, 곧 is also sometimes shortened to 코 for no other reason than it's easier to say and creates a shorter sentence. So, 저는 밥을 먹을 것이에요 versus 저는 밥을 먹을 거예요. Now, I would almost never say this sentence. I would almost always say this sentence. You're probably 90% of the time going to hear this instead of 것이에요. Notice that 이에요 is added when 것, which ends in a 받침, a consonant, is used. So that's why it's 이에요, and here it's 이에요 because there's no 시읒 anymore. Some more examples. Note the Korean people are also confused if they need to add 이에요 or 예요 or 에요 to 코, which is very true. 할 거예요. Yeah, this is also when I was doing this lesson, the lesson recap on how to study Korean's channel. I didn't remember this at all. I actually thought it was I thought it was 할 거예요 and not 할 거예요. It's confusing, so don't worry about it if you confuse it. Or if you want to be like, if you're taking a TOPIK test, then you should probably know this, but I'm not taking it, so I don't have to worry about it. Anyways, other examples. 나는 내일 친구를 만날 것이야. I'll meet a friend, or 만날 거야. You can read the rest of the sentences. I'm just trying to go over it with you. In lesson 7, you learned about, irregulars. Nice. All right. You learned how irregular words change as a result of adding different additions. This is the first time you'll be introduced to adding 리을/을. Now let's look at some irregulars. The 시읒 irregular, 디귿 irregular, 비읍 irregular follow the same exact rule in lesson 7. The addition of a vowel causes a change or elimination of the last letter. The and 르 irregulars are not affected by this addition. So adding 리을/을 to the word that follows the 리을 irregular brings about a change that we're not familiar with yet. Normally, you would add 리을 to the stem of the word ending in the vowel and to the stem of the word ending in a consonant. So 잃다 would be 잃을, 예쁘다 would be 예쁠. However, when you add 리을/을 to the stem of a word that ends in 리을, the 리을 is dropped and 리을 is attached directly to the stem. Haha, I didn't actually think of it that way. I just thought we don't attach it. So 칼 becomes 칼다 becomes 카, and then you would add the 리을, so still stay as 칼. 열 would be 열, or 여 and then 열, so it wouldn't change basically. 열 거예요. So here's a table that you can see. So 짓다, you get rid of the 시읒. 지을 것이다. 걷다, you're going to switch it to the real, the ticket to regular. Remember, koro, you say koroyo, you don't say kodoyo for walking. So 걸을 것이다. 쉽다, you don't say 쉬을 거예요, you say 쉬을 거예요, 쉬올 거예요. And then 덥다, 더올 것이다. 잠그다, it just stays the same. 잠글 것이다. 다르다, 다를 거예요. 길다, 길 것이다. I try to stick to the plain form, but I kind of end up saying 예요 just because you don't speak in the plain form very often. Okay. Also, you'll notice that I included the word 덥다. As you learned in lesson 7, P-up changes to O when A-O is added. So, yeah, so that's why you say 도와주세요 versus 쉬울 것이다. We talked about it in lesson 7, so you don't have to worry about it too much. You'll see this happen in a lot of other things like 레요 or 을까요 or 할게요 or 을걸, which is one of my favorite endings in Korean. Just because it's so versatile and it's like short, and it's one of the ones that I didn't understand or know how to use on my own. I actually had to look it up, or I had one of my friends look it up. She looked it up and she told me. I didn't ask a Korean friend, which is kind of strange. I usually ask one of my Korean friends, but it's one of my favorite endings, or like conjugations. Let's put it that way. All right, now using the future of ida using 되다. So here's something you should probably pay attention to. So you can kind of ignore a lot of the stuff and you'll learn it through context and through reading and through listening. This is just a lot of conjugation practice, past tense, present tense, all that kind of stuff, future tense. When you're talking about the future tense now, where you're saying like, actually, let's read what he says. So, conjugating ida to the future tense is the same as is done above, but it's also possible to use another verb, 되다. 되다 is one of the hardest words in Korean, mainly because it has so many meanings. You will be introduced to each of these meanings as you progress through our lessons. But the first meaning of 되다 is to become, which is slightly different than to be. Now, let me introduce the word 되다 to you by showing you examples of it being used in the past tense. Note the way 되다 is used. Note the way 되다 is used. 가 is attached to the noun that the subject becomes instead of 를 or 을. So 저는 선생님이 되었어요, which is slightly different than 저는 선생님이었어요. Why? Because this is I became a teacher and this is I was a teacher. So you can see how that's different. Very similar, but the difference to become and to be. All right, I became a teacher last year and I was a teacher last year. When I say I became a teacher last year with 되다, it means that's when I started becoming a teacher. That's when I finally became a teacher. When I say I was a teacher last year, that's not when I started becoming a teacher, but I was a teacher at some point last year and I probably stopped. And you're not specifying if you were a teacher before then or not. So, 되다 can also be used in the present tense. And again, different slightly from ida. I'll save examples for when I've presented more grammatical principles further into the course. My whole purpose is mentioning it is to explain the application to the future tense. First off, it's kind of awkward to conjugate ida to the future tense using 겠다. 선생님이 겠다. Okay, that is kind of awkward. Now, if you want to say something will be something in the future, because of the nature of the word 되다, there is no real difference if you use 되다 or ida. So I will become a teacher or I will be a teacher. So 선생님일 거예요 or 곧 선생님이 될 거예요 or 것입니다. I don't know why it has different formalities. I guess to get you practice in the different formalities. So basically what he's saying is you could probably say 되다 for like, I'm going to be a teacher. Like 선생님이 될 거야. I'm going to be a teacher. Instead of 선생님일 거야, I will be a teacher. Where in English there's not much of a difference. I'll become a teacher. In the future tense, there's not much of a difference. As in the past tense, you could see I became a teacher and I was a teacher are very different. But in the future tense, they're not that much different. I will become a teacher and I will be a teacher. But basically, you can use either one. I would say 되다 is just what I lean towards, but I'm not Korean, so I can't tell you which is more natural. I feel like 되다 is probably what you would use though. I just want to point out here that 일 you are saying is not the word 일. This is just 이다 plus 릴. Haha, that's funny. It's a good thing that he pointed that out. Alright, as you build vocabulary, you will be able to apply the same format of sentence to create something like this place will become a park next year. I will become a doctor in a few months. So, the sentence above, using 이다 and 되다 in the future tense, can be used to make negative sentences as well. So we learned negative sentences last episode. When making the negative form of 되다 sentences, you can just add 안 or 지 않다, just like any other verb or adjective. What that means is, you can say 되지 않을 거야 or 아닐 거야. So, let's see. So, 이 장소는 공원이 되지 않을 거야. This place won't become a park. Or 이 장소는 공원이 아닐 거야. This place won't become a park. Or won't be a park. I tried to read slowly just because I got comments saying that I should, but sorry if I read a little too fast. I'm also probably talking really fast and talking low, but I can always fix that. Okay, these sentences, while kind of ridiculous, are all grammatically correct. I can't think of any time when you'd actually want to say a sentence like that. This place will not become a park. But they are all possible if the right situation comes up. Most of the time, there will be a better way to say each of these sentences. So, I actually didn't read the sentence. Wait. Oh, for example, instead of saying this sentence, it would be more natural to say, I don't want to become a doctor in the future. But we haven't talked about that, so I don't really want to go into these sentences for a specific reason, obviously. All right, one other quick thing. It doesn't look quick to me. Well, it's pretty long for a quick thing. And I really don't want to spend too much time. Proceeds to spending a whole page. Because I've already overwhelmed you with the grammar, which is very true. You should probably watch this video like more than once. Wouldn't recommend watching the whole thing all at once. However, how long has this been? 32 minutes. Wow. All right. The future conjugation of ida is introduced in this lesson, and I feel the need to talk about it here. By using the future tense, 이를/을 것이다 conjugation of ida, you also create a sentence where the speaker is guessing about a certain situation in the future, in the present tense. So let's look at an example. So I know what he's going to talk about. 그 사람이 의사일 거예요. That person is probably or most likely a doctor. Now, again, 일 here is not the what's it called? To work. It's ida plus dir. So apparently he also gets a lot of questions from learners asking me where this 일 came from. It's just ida plus dir/을. Now, these sentences can also be said using 아니다. So 그 사람이 의사가 아닐 거야. That person is probably not a doctor. So even though this is the future tense conjugation, we're making a guess about the present, if that makes any sense. Notice that in these cases, the speaker is not talking about him or herself because this wouldn't make any sense. You don't need to guess about yourself. Or in this case, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm probably not a doctor right now. I'm probably not a passport. Also, even though the sentence is conjugated into the future tense, I already talked about this, thus it's weird to include time indicators next year because the speaker is not trying to create this meaning because it's a guess. The question then becomes, how can I distinguish if somebody is saying one of these guessing sentences or something will become something? You will learn continuously throughout your Korean studies that understanding a Korean sentence is all about context. Very true. The situation almost always makes it clear, so you don't have to worry about it. For now, rather than concern yourself with these guessing nuances, just focus on the future tense. Don't really worry about what he wrote here. Just keep it in the back of your mind. You're probably going to forget it. That's totally okay. Move on. Really pay attention to the 되다 section and the future tense. And that's it for this lesson. And I'll see you guys in the next one.